good morning, and thank you for tuning into the Sci-Fi Academia YouTube channel. Today we're taking a closer look at Stephen Moffat's second episode of Doctor Who, entitled The Girl in the Fireplace, which historically is one of my favorite episodes. But does it hold up now? What are the similarities between this episode and other episodes that Stephen Moffat wrote? And most importantly, stay tuned till the very end of the video when we talk about the moral of the story which we can apply to our lives.
This episode, historically, is one of my favorites. I think it's pretty good. And I'm realizing how much in this series I've said that. It's crazy how, for such a long-running show, how many solid bangers of episodes Stephen Moffat and Russell T were actually able to get out. If you look at a show like Star Trek Next Generation, which is another one of my favorite TV shows, by the way, but there's a lot of really bad episodes of Star Trek Next Generation. With Doctor Who, although I'm sure there's more, the only episode I can think of that is actually a bad episode is Love and Monsters. But wait a minute, past me? What are you even talking about? I know for a fact that there is a episode in which Peter Capaldi meets Robin Hood that you can't stand, and one where he meets Vikings that you can't stand. I know this because I am you. Okay, so I think what I was kind of saying here isn't necessarily that there's no episodes that I personally don't like, but there's not many episodes that are largely hated by the fan base. I think the only one I can think of is Love and Monsters, whereas Star Trek Next Generation has several episodes, I feel. The common consensus is that they are pretty poor episodes.
A woman?
And I don't feel like in the Doctor Who there is as much of that. But the point past me is about to get to is that it seems like there's more and more stinker episodes as TV goes on, and that seems to be very much the case with Doctor Who. At this time, most episodes were really enjoyable, but then when we get to the end of the Matt Smith era into the Capaldi era, I think there's a lot more stinkers, at least for my personal taste and preference. One, to clear that up, I'm editing now, so yeah. It seems like as time goes on, TV shows just have more and more stinkers of episodes. And I don't really know why. I understand making a TV show is difficult, and a stinker episode could be expected every once in a while. But why are they so much more common now than they were before? Perhaps a question for another day. Today we're talking about Stephen Moffat's second episode of Doctor Who, The Girl in the Fireplace. I think this might be Stephen Moffat's best Doctor Who episode. It's at least his best episode in the Russell T era. I like the 11th hour a lot as well. And I'm sure there's other episodes in his era that are also great. I really like this episode, you guys. I really like this episode. This episode has a very intriguing opening. It's a little different. Usually we see someone being killed by the monster that the Doctor has to go up against. And well, that's kind of that. We see people panicking, and it's revealed that this woman knows the Doctor, right? And then we get the opening music, which, by the way, I know I've said this many times. I'll say it again. Whatever, sue me. The Doctor Who opening music, beautiful, wonderful, amazing. Watching that TARDIS slide through the time vortex. Oh my goodness, it's so beautiful. And I don't think that the opener ever looks better than it does here. Maybe in the Disney Plus era, that might be the one thing the Disney Plus era has actually gotten right. Now, the Doctor, Mickey, and Rose find themselves on a spaceship. And Mickey is very happy to be on a spaceship. The Doctor sees that the ship itself has enough power to punch a hole in the universe, he says. But yet, the ship isn't going anywhere. So where is the power going? I really like this setup. It's very fun, just the concept of being like, oh, there's power going somewhere, but we don't know where. That's an intriguing mystery. And also, as some of you might know if you've watched my other videos, because I talk about it sometimes, I work in construction on my day job, and sometimes that happens. Sometimes you have power going places, and you don't know where. And after wondering where everyone who should be running the spaceship is, he finds the fireplace that the episode is named after. I've never picked up on this really before or given it too much thought, but I love the shot of the Doctor, like, being able to see there's a room on the other side of the fireplace. At the same time, Rose is looking out the window into the void of space, seeing that there definitely isn't a room on the other side of the fireplace. You know, this shows that it's not just a room that's recreated to look like France. It is actually France on the other side of the fireplace. This is one of the episodes I've seen the most of Doctor Who, and that little detail has never stood out to me, but it is pretty well done. It pretty well shows that something weird is going on here. This is when we see the girl in the fireplace the episode was named for, in the fireplace that has the girl in it that the episode was named for, the episode being the girl in the fireplace that was named for this girl that we see in the fireplace. Now, this episode does have one Moffatism that I don't particularly like. You know, Moffatism just being, like, something that Moffat likes to put into all of his scripts. And this episode has an instance of that where the Doctor says something technobabbly just to say he made it up.
Spatio-temporal hyperlink. What's that? No idea. Just made it up. Didn't want to say magic door.
These lines just make the Doctor feel kind of less smart to me, and by extension of that, less interesting to watch. This is a better case of it because it kind of fits in the Doctor to not know what he's talking about, but to act like he kind of knows what he's talking about because he's kind of scared of not knowing what he talks about, which is sort of my reading on this line in this episode.
Didn't want to say magic door.
However, in later Stephen Moffat written episodes, there's lines that make it seem like the Doctor actually never knows what he talks about. Which to me, it feels like it's kind of a betrayal of what we want to see from that character. There's one episode in particular in the Peter Capaldi era where he says, reverse the polarity of the neutron flow, and he says, or something like that. It sounds good.
Reversing the polarity of the neutron flow. But that means something. It sounds great.
And I don't like this because that implies that every other time he said,
I've reversed the polarity of the neutron flows.
He doesn't actually know what he's doing. He's just pointing the sonic screwdriver, and it's working its magic to sort of change things or do whatever, and he doesn't actually know what he's doing. I know I'm probably overthinking it, and it was just like a line that was put in the episode to make us laugh, but welcome to YouTube. After the Doctor talks to the girl in the fireplace, the Doctor says that she was speaking French, and Mickey says, no, we're speaking English. Rose says, the TARDIS translated. And then Mickey's like, oh, I didn't know the TARDIS could translate even French.
Even French?
Yep.
I just find that kind of funny. Just the fact that Mickey was like, well, yeah, sure, it could translate languages, but even the French language? Maybe he was thinking that the TARDIS could only translate alien languages and not languages from here on Earth. But I find it kind of funny. It's a kind of funny line. And this episode is very well written. There's a moment that I just love where he goes through the fireplace and he's looking at the clock and sees that it's broken and realizes that the ticking noise that we hear in the background is coming from somewhere else. Now, it has been pointed out to me that I did a similar bit in The Empty Child, but I say, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. It's my motto! Which is kind of ironic, because here we're talking about a broken clock. And the Clockwork Man hiding underneath the bed is a great use of childhood fear to put in the show. You know, I'm pretty sure every kid has had the fear that maybe there's something under our beds that's gonna attack us or, you know, try and get us if we get off our bed. And to make that actually being the case here, I really like that. I like that sort of childhood horror sort of storytelling where it's like probably not that scary for rational adults that know that there's not monsters under the bed. But for kids, it's really scary. And I think this is important because it teaches kids that they can overcome the things that they're scared of. Sure, there's monsters in the world. You know, you can defeat the monster, right? You can, if you watch Doctor Who, you might be a little bit scared because maybe there's a monster under the bed. But if you keep watching, you'll realize it has a happy ending. And I think too many shows try too hard to be soft to actually be beneficial in that way. Something I was thinking about watching this episode, which I haven't really heard been talked about too much, just like on the internet, is that this episode does have a little bit of the 11th hour in it. I don't think that's a problem with this episode or the 11th hour. I don't think it's a flaw to want to tell similar stories, and Stephen Moffat does reuse a lot of elements from episodes he's written, and I don't have a problem with it because those elements are good and, you know, perfectly able to be reused. And I kind of like stories that are sort of different flavors of similar products. If you look at Star Wars, the original trilogy, and look at the prequels, it's kind of interesting the way the stories parallel each other in certain ways. George Lucas said that they rhyme with each other.
And instead of destroying the Death Star, he destroys the ship that controls the robots. Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
And I think that's an interesting way to think about, especially something like Star Wars or Doctor Who, where it's like a story you want to feel magical. And it's just fun to see different takes on similar stories. You know, I like Spider-Man and Superman. I also like Invincible. That's sort of a new take on a similar story, a similar character. All that being said, the similarities between this and the 11th hour is it has the Doctor run into a little girl. The little girl considers him to be her imaginary friend, or other people think that he is her imaginary friend. And then the Doctor appears to the little girl when she is a adult woman, and now she's in love with him for some reason, which is a little bit creepy. I definitely think Stephen Moffat liked to make the Doctor do some kissing.
Is there a lot of this in the future?
It does start to happen, yeah.
I don't think that's completely a bad thing. I think Stephen Moffat is really good at figuring out what stories kind of entertain people, and I think he knows people like a love story. Now, is there maybe a little bit too much of it? I think so. But I also do kind of like a love story with the Doctor. I do like to think of the Doctor himself as being kind of less romantically inclined. I think, in my head, I think he can, like, sort of bring himself there, but as him being, like, this kind of alien guy, it doesn't come as naturally to him. Or maybe he purposefully tries to avoid it because he's a man on a mission and he doesn't have time for these things. I don't know. I sort of have mixed feelings of that element of the character. I prefer to think of the Doctor as being at least a little bit asexual. Which, by the way, one of my favorite Doctors, John Pertwee, has actually said about the character.
No relationship or even suggestion of any relationship with the Doctor and any of his companions. And so it just doesn't exist. He's completely and utterly asexual.
And the Doctor ends up defeating the Clockwork Man with a fire extinguisher back in the spaceship, and he's fascinated by the mechanics of this robot, which I love. I think the Doctor should always be fascinated with engineering and approach the world with curiosity and fascination. Those were the elements of the character that I really attached to watching Doctor Who as a kid. The show making him curious and fascinated and interested in like all of these other little details, while also making him seem really cool, I think helped me growing up to have the same outlook on the world around me. And I think more people could use that sort of outlook. I think that outlook would be beneficial for a lot of people. So many people are so depressed these days about everything they see around them. And I think a lot of that sort of philosophy has creeped into modern Doctor Who. And I think what I want is a Doctor Who that will help people to fall back in love with the beautiful world that God has placed us on. The Doctor should be a character that tells young people it's okay to interact with the world through curiosity and wonder. And while there is some elements of that in the 15th Doctor, I kind of feel his character to be so all over the place, I don't really know who he is. Maybe if his era would have gone on longer, then they would have kind of figured out who he is. But as of what we got, we just don't really know what he is. The Doctor goes back through the fireplace, telling Rose and Mickey not to look for the Clockwork Man who teleported away. And Mickey and Rose, they kind of react how I would expect the Doctor to, where they just want to go after the Clockwork Man anyway. And I think maybe some of the curiosity and excitement from the Doctor has kind of rubbed off on these two. On a side note, I do like the characterization of Mickey in this episode. I believe I've heard that Stephen Moffat didn't originally write the script to have Mickey in it, but then because of where they placed the episode, he had to add in Mickey later. And maybe part of that is the reason that his character just seems a little bit more likable in this episode. I mean, I do like the characterization of Mickey previously, of him sort of being a man-child, in the way that you can kind of look at him and be like, oh yeah, I kind of know that guy. I know a few guys that are just like him. And I also like how his character changes throughout this season. And this episode does kind of feel like a bridge for the character. He's not quite the man-child Mickey, but he's also not quite the sort of freedom fighter Mickey that we see at the end of the season. This is when the Doctor runs back into the girl in the fireplace, but now, of course, she's a grown woman, so now she can kiss the Doctor. And it's not till after she does so that the Doctor realizes that she is Madame de Pompadour, a historical figure that all I know about comes from this episode of Doctor Who. The Doctor goes back to the spaceship, complaining about Rose and Mickey wandering off, which is kind of an ironic complaint coming from the Doctor, as the Doctor is kind of the king of wandering off and doing his own thing. Or maybe that's just a characterization of him that I have adopted in my own head. Probably coming from the episode Vampires in Venice, where he does that. Though in that episode, he is purposefully leaving Amy and Rory alone. And this is when the Doctor ends up running into something truly terrifying. A horse. And while the Doctor is dealing with this horrible abomination that we call a horse, Mickey just finds a camera and it has a human eye in it. So, not a big deal. Much more scared of the horse. And there's a heart-powering part of the ship as well. Say what you will about Stephen Moffat, but I do love how he's not afraid to get a little bit creepy. I think part of the problem of Doctor Who in recent years is that they were afraid to get a little bit creepy. There's a story of Stephen Moffat working on Disney Plus Doctor Who, and he does like sort of a fake out death of the character of Ruby Sunday, I believe it was. And Stephen Moffat is like, oh no, we don't want people to think Ruby Sunday might be dead. And Stephen Moffat like jokingly responded, oh, you've gone soft. And I think Stephen Moffat did mean it in a friendly way, but I do feel like it's part of the problem with the show is that it's gotten too soft, and we don't have that feeling of the monsters under the bed anymore. Although horses are scary, and we all know it, it is a little bit adorable seeing this horse imprint on the Doctor and follow him around the spaceship.
Will you stop following me?
The Doctor wanders through a door where he gets to spy on Madame de Pompadour, and she's chatting with Guinevere from Merlin. Side note, I just learned that Anthony Head, who recently passed away, by the way, he played the villain of the last episode, and of course was a big part of the Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV show. He plays King Uther in Merlin, and I don't know how I've never realized that before. It's kind of crazy, because once you know it's him, it's so obvious. I guess it's just a small world when it comes to BBC shows. Like, they all have to pull from the same pool of actors. Or maybe it's just the ones that I recognize. I can't wait till I get to the episode that has the actor who plays Merlin, because that is, I think, my all-time favorite episode of Doctor Who. It's called Midnight. It's basically an episode of The Twilight Zone, which, Doctor Who and Twilight Zone kind of tied for my favorite show ever. Star Trek Next Generation competes up there with them a lot. I have to imagine when Russell T wrote Midnight, he was inspired by The Twilight Zone. I should maybe look into that, because he may have said that somewhere. A lot of things were inspired by The Twilight Zone. I gotta move on before I talk too much about The Twilight Zone in this Doctor Who review. Watch The Twilight Zone, though. It is very good. Some episodes are a little boring because it's an older show, but most of them honestly hold up and are still very engaging. So I highly recommend The Twilight Zone. After a while, the Doctor ends up back with Mickey and Rose, and Mickey is hilariously surprised that there is a horse on a spaceship.
Mickey, what's pre-revolutionary France doing on a spaceship? Get a little perspective.
It's not that long before we learn that the Clockwork Men were using the ship crew for parts to keep flying. This is very cool. I like that. I like that concept. It's very scary. It's very scary and it's very cool. And I like it. Anyway, moving forward in the plot a little bit, there is a Clockwork Man, and he attacks Renette or Madame de Pompadour as an older woman. She tells it to go away. For some reason it does. And then the Doctor does this sort of Vulcan mind meld with her. I believe this is really the first episode where we see the Doctor doing any sort of like telepathic abilities. Though Moffat does like to give the Doctor what I call Spock powers. And come to think of it, in the first episode Stephen Moffat wrote, he called the Doctor Spock. It was like a running gag that Rose called the Doctor Spock in that episode. Is this all a secret scheme where Stephen Moffat is trying to tell us the Doctor is actually a Vulcan? Or maybe the Vulcans go on to evolve into Time Lords? No, probably not. Someone make a fan theory about that though. That would be fun. And during this sort of Time Lord mind meld thing, the fireplace girl actually sort of switches around and starts looking at the Doctor's memories, saying that once a door is opened, it can be walked through in both directions. I think this is Stephen Moffat's way of just showing us that she's really cool, because she can know how to do that. And I'm fine with it. I like it. It does that. It does that well, I think. But then we have a line I don't really like. It's where she asks him, Doctor Who.
Doctor Who? It's more than just a secret, isn't it?
And this is another Moffatism that I don't really like. I don't mind people asking Doctor Who in cases where it makes sense. This one doesn't really make sense to me. That's not how someone would naturally say what she's trying to say. But he just wanted to put the title of the show in there. And of course Stephen Moffat later would make the first words or the first question ever asked Doctor Who. And I just think it's a little bit indulgent of the show, not even of Stephen Moffat, just of the show, to be like, the Doctor's just so important that the very first thing anyone ever asked supposedly was Doctor Who. Anyway, that story just didn't really gel with me personally. Also, side note, the Doctor dances in this episode.
Dance with me.
He dances with Fireplace Girl. And you're probably like, okay, why is that a big deal? Stephen Moffat wrote an episode called The Doctor Dances. I feel like there's other cases as well of like Stephen Moffat going out of his way to put references to the Doctor dancing. I don't know. Is this another conspiracy? This is maybe a more real conspiracy than Stephen Moffat trying to tell us Time Lords are Vulcans. What is he trying to tell us about the Doctor dancing? I can guarantee that in, what's that episode? Is it The Husbands of River Song? I think, where it's the episode right before she goes to silence in the library. If you don't know Doctor Who stuff, you're going to be confused for a second. But anyway, I think he dances with River Song. Why, Moffat? What is your interest in the Doctor dancing? Tell me this. Why? While the Doctor's doing this dancing, Mickey and Rose find themselves captured by the Clockwork Men. I don't blame Stephen Moffat for reusing this banana line.
Bananas are good.
It's a very good line, and it makes sense that the Doctor's preferences for bananas wouldn't change. Yeah, bananas are good. I agree, Tennant/Eccleston. We can all agree bananas are good. Basically what we come to figure out is that these Clockwork Men are trying to get Fireplace Girl's brain to use for the mother circuit of the ship. But they have to find the window that will lead them to a time where she is the right age before they can take her brain. There's a lot of sort of poetic Shakespearean-esque dialogue in this episode that I actually really like for my Doctor Who. I like my Doctor Who to have this sort of grandioseness to it, and here we get a lot of that. We have Fireplace Girl, talking about sort of explaining how there could be like a time ship where it has different parts of her timeline. She sort of explains it in a way that someone from her time period could understand.
There is a vessel in your world where the days of my life are pressed together like the chapters of a book, so that he may step from one to the other without increase of age, while I, weary traveller, must always take the slower path.
That's a cool image, and she also says that the Doctor and the monsters go hand in hand. A lot of this just like really interesting sort of poetic, flowery language to describe the Doctor, which I enjoy quite a bit. I like that in my Doctor Who. So then we see the Clockwork Men attacking the celebration that we saw in the beginning with the people screaming, and the Doctor crashes in on his new horse. It's still just as scary, because horses are always scary. And then in a scene reminiscent of all of the battle droids sort of collapsing in the Phantom Menace, all of these Clockwork Men sort of seem to run out of whatever is powering them. Maybe it's because the Doctor broke the time windows, or maybe it's just they had to go back to the ship to recharge. Because the Doctor says, I'm not going to wind you back up. Did he mean literally wind them up, or was that metaphor? But then he also says that they stopped because they no longer have a purpose. So I don't entirely know why they stopped. I don't think the episode makes it exactly clear. Or maybe I'm just too dumb to understand it. You're probably gonna say I'm too dumb to understand it. Let me know why I'm too dumb in the comment section. Oh, best way to fish for people to comment on these videos. Now, it is kind of odd that the Doctor was willing to just strand Rose and Mickey on the spaceship. He knew he couldn't go back, and presumably Rose and Mickey can't fly the TARDIS without him, so it sort of feels a little bit out of character. In the parting of the ways, we see the Doctor have the TARDIS send Rose back to her time, and here he's just willing to leave her in space. I think that's a little bit of a plot hole, or something that, to enjoy the episode, you just sort of have to look past, or assume maybe that the Doctor thought maybe he could end up finding a way back, which conveniently he actually does end up doing, but it does seem like he's not able to, he doesn't think he'll be able to find a way back when he is stuck in the past. It's a whole thing, and it kind of doesn't quite come together right. It doesn't take away from my enjoyment of the episode. I still find the episode very enjoyable, though I'm not a big plot hole person. I don't necessarily like to point out every little plot hole. Or I'll point them out, but they don't take away from my enjoyment of the show or of the episode, I guess. And Fireplace Girl had the fireplace moved to her new room, which means that it wasn't destroyed when the rest of the time windows were destroyed. And basically the Doctor is able to use that to get back. And we get a really nice sort of tragic ending of this episode, where the Doctor promises to bring Fireplace Girl with him on the TARDIS to look at the stars, but then, because time moves differently through the time windows than it does on the spaceship, by the time he gets back through the fireplace woman has already died. And I love the tragedy there. I think it's done really well. And that's kind of this episode. Before you tune off, let's talk about the moral of the story. So, the moral of this story will come from the fireplace girl. And that is just sort of a story of being patient. She had to wait long periods of time before she could see the doctor again. And in her letter to the doctor that she writes to the doctor before she dies, she says that logic kind of tells her that she's never gonna see the doctor again, but she's actually like, she chooses to believe she will. She's willing to wait for it. This is another element, by the way, that sort of connects this to the 11th hour and Amy, with Amy sort of being, the girl who waits is what the doctor calls her. So, fireplace girl, another girl who waits. Sometimes it pays to wait and be patient and things will sort of come together, and sometimes they won't, but that's fine and that's okay. Because even if we aren't reunited with our loved ones, or, stuff just doesn't work out exactly how we want it to, we still have all those memories, and those are valuable in of themselves. So, thank you so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you like the video. I hope you comment on the video. I hope you subscribe to the Sci-Fi Academia YouTube channel for more reviews on Doctor Who, Star Wars, and Star Trek, and some other stuff. I like science fiction on this channel. Yeah, thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video. Until next time, don't forget to brush your teeth. Front and back, back and front. Adios. The video is over. No, that's not what I meant to say. But they have to... that the common nope, can't get that word right.